work developed my colleague Fatjona, who is here and who is going to be speaking about. But most of all, a very, very interesting conversation about specifically the connections that exist between Western Balkan groups and South America, a topic which has been top of mind, but let's say not so developed among researchers and people. We have today a very interesting conversation. It's going to be here Fatjona, who is the author of the piece that we are launching, Sasha, who was also part of the research process and who is going to be taking deep down in the findings of the research. And I'm also very pleased to introduce my colleague Renato Rivera. He is from Ecuador and he is a very interesting researcher on organized crime who has been following this topic and who will provide a more specific context of South America. Let me introduce me first. I am Felipe Botero. I am the head of the Andean Region Observatory of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and I will be moderating this conversation. And just before we start, I would like to give or to provide a very brief introduction about what has happened here in South America in the supply chain of the cocaine production. And let's say that after 2016, when the demobilization of FARC-EP happened as a result of the peace agreement between FARC and the government, there has been a whole change and a whole shift in the cocaine landscape, not only locally, but also globally. And we believe that this is very related to what we are going to be discussing today. And why this happened? Because FARC left and FARC left aside their weapons and leave a vacuum in the places where cocaine is produced. It's where coca leaves are grown, it's transformed to spice base, and it's produced to cocaine. And this vacuum has been taken by local groups who are trying to secure their portion and their position in the business. But then FARC also operated as a broker and defined deals with international transnational organized groups. When FARC left, this space was left open. And then transnational organized crime groups that were buying cocaine, both in Colombia, in Peru, and in Bolivia, start getting to the places of cultivations that are mainly in the borders of Colombia, both with Ecuador and with Venezuela, and try to secure direct purchases of cocaine. This has brought a plethora of different transnational organized crime groups. Some of them are more known, for example, Mexican cartels, who has been present in the country for a while. Others has been operating from the other side of the borders, and here I'm mainly speaking about Brazilian transnational organized crime groups. PCC and Comando Vermelho has been trying to secure cocaine and move it through the Amazon route, moving from Putumayo River and Amazon River down to Brazil, both to supply the local market in Brazil, but also trying to reach ports in Brazil to connect through West Africa, both to Europe, UK, and beyond. But then there is, let's say, a newcomer, if we would like to put it in these words, and these newcomers are the Western Balkans transnational organized crime groups. And I say new, and I put it in quotation, because one of the findings that we are going to be discussing today is that they have been present in the region for many years, but the same way how they operate has made them to go very low under the radar, and they behave different than other transnational organized criminal groups like Mexicans or Brazilians, and they have a very specific way to make business in this side of the world. And this is precisely what we are going to be discussing today. We are right now in a moment when there is more and more cocaine production. Both the hectares of plantation has grown, both the production of cocaine has grown, not only in Colombia, but also in neighboring countries, mainly in Peru and in Bolivia. But one of the interesting components is that after 2016, other countries and other players have started to play a key role in this cocaine global supply chain. Ecuador is one of them, and Renato, I believe, is going to be explaining a little bit what's happening in this South American country. But not only other countries have started to secure to play a role in the business, but the cocaine business has also become more and more complex and more intertwined with other criminal markets. And specifically in the border between Colombia and Ecuador, there is an interconnection not only with the cocaine business, but also with the gold illegal mining thing, where there are different logics of laundering money generated by the cocaine business through illegal mining, and then using that gold to actually launder that money. And it's a full circle, which is making these groups, both local and transnational, operating in these zones, powerful and richer than ever. But today we're not going to be speaking about all of them. As I told you, after FARC, there has been a fragmentation that was key in the security crisis lived by Ecuador, but also a fragmentation in the transnational actors who are operating in South America. One of them is Western Balkans transnational groups. And first of all, I want to congratulate Fatjona and her team for the amazing work that you have done leading a research that took more than 2 years of work in both sides of the Atlantic to bring us today a perspective that I believe it's new and has not been yet developed in South America. Fatjona, it's really a pleasure to introduce you. Fatjona is the director of the Western Balkans Observatory of GI-TOC, and then the floor is yours with this interesting presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Felipe. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for the interest in the report on the cocaine links between the Western Balkans and the South America. It's truly a pleasure, and I have to say also a privilege for me to launch this report with all of you as our audience today. Can we start the presentation? Yes. The first slide, please. Before we dive into the content of the report, I would like to briefly explain the methodology that we have used for this report. It is based on primarily data gathered through research conducted in Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, in South America, and also in the Western Balkans, in the countries of Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia. For this report, we have conducted over 100 interviews between October 22 and November 23. And we have an even split. 50% of the interviews have been conducted in South America and 50 of them in Western Balkans. The people that we have interviewed for this report include police and custom officials, investigative journalists, civil society representatives, experts on drug trafficking, and more. We also draw on additional sources, including reports from international organizations and governments, academic and policy literature, and of course, very valuable media sources. Next slide. The report analyzes the evolution of the Western Balkan organized crime groups in South America. Based on the data that we have collected, we see that the Western Balkan OCGs established links in South America from the late 1990s to mid-20s, expanded in the early 2010s, and consolidated by mid-2010s. The pioneers were individuals from the Western Balkans with prior criminal experience in the United States, who recognized the strategic location of the Balkans as the key transit point for shipping cocaine from South America to Europe. The criminal organizations like Group America, formed by migrants of former Yugoslavia, mainly Serbs in the 70s and the 80s in the US, it is believed to have pioneered cocaine trafficking in the Western Balkan region. By the mid-2000s, as shown in the graph on your left, local criminal organizations like the Darko Šarić Group further began establishing cocaine links in South America and started making the first transfers to both the region but also major European ports. The real breakthrough, however, came in the early 2010s, when we saw more and more groups from the Western Balkans moving into South America, aiming so to become main wholesalers of cocaine in Europe. And their presence was consolidated by mid 2010s, as we also mentioned. The group that emerged in South America during this period, such as the Montenegrin Kotor group, now that is split into Kavac and Cagliari fractions, the Bosnian-based Tito and Dino cartel, and the Albanian-speaking networks Compagnia Bello, are still some of the most prominent groups currently operating in this region, but also throughout the world. This entrenchment in South America has transformed them from local players into major actors in global cocaine trafficking, allowing them to procure large amounts of cocaine directly from producers and operate across multiple continents. However, their primary operations remain focused on Europe, where they are now key players in the cocaine trade. This is also further reinforced by Europol data that we have analyzed. So, for example, over the past 3 years, approximately half of the targets of Europol coordinated cocaine operations, or 26 of them, have been linked to individuals and networks from the Western Balkans. This figure, in fact, it shows their prominence in the European continent. Next slide. Their pursuit of cocaine has been driven by key pull factors. Felipe also mentioned in the beginning that one of these key factor was the surge in cocaine production. So cocaine production in South America surged with coca bush cultivation doubling from 2013 to 2017. By 2020, production in Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia had nearly reached 2,000 tons, up from less than 1,000 tons in 2014. On the other hand, also mentioned by Felipe, is the criminal fragmentation that we are seeing right now in South America. The decline of major cartels and the fragmentation of criminal structures in Colombia made it easier for foreign actors like Western Balkan crime groups to establish direct link with local cocaine producer by passing so intermediaries. On the other hand, without any doubt, one of the most important pull factor is the rising demand for cocaine in Europe. Despite a drop in seizures in early 2024, cocaine availability in Europe remained and remains stable or even increased. This is supported by large seizures of cocaine in major European ports, but also of the rising levels of cocaine detected in the wastewater across the European continent. But their journey upstream in the pursuit of securing large amount of cocaine has also been driven by important push factors rooted in the history of the Western Balkan crime groups and the Balkan itself. So first, we can mention the strategic location. So the Balkan and especially the Western Balkan region has been always a crossroad of between Eastern and Western Europe, and it always has been a key hub for various criminal activities, including heroin trafficking, arms smuggling, and human trafficking. These activities, at the beginning of the 90s especially, have founded and boosted the sophistication of the Balkan criminal groups. On the other hand, we know that the Balkan has gone through wars and wars that they ended, in fact, in the early 2000s. But also these wars have left in the region some vulnerabilities like weak political and judicial systems, offering criminals opportunities to exploit in their home country corruption and act with impunity. On the other hand, is the experience that they have in tough environment and the violence. So the wars in the Balkans, they also have sharpened this group's ability to use extreme violence in order to achieve their goals. More important is also the access that they had to weapons that has kind of like further solidify their reputation as skilled criminal players. One key movement that I have to mention that has later contributed to the rise of Western Balkan OCGs in Latin America is the fact that in the early 2000s, members of the criminal groups from the Western Balkans, they didn't stay in their home countries, but they have started slowly to expand and to form important bases in some of the main Western European countries like Italy, Spain, Austria, Germany, and of course the Netherlands and the Belgium. where also some of the major hubs of cocaine entering in Europe are. So this kind of consolidation and presence in these key European countries has helped them in their transnational efforts of cocaine. Next slide. But of course, in order to be successful in the South American continent, it needs more than just pull and push factors, but it also needs some kind of like innovative ways and how to organize themselves. Contrary, in fact, to popular beliefs, key leader of criminal groups from the Western Balkans, generally, they don't settle in South America. Instead, they usually reside in their home countries, in major European, Western European cities, or sometimes they migrate to countries like United Arab Emirates to seek shelter, especially after are sought by the police. The success, in fact, of these criminal organizations in South America is largely due to skilled brokers who work for them either part-time or full-time. These brokers come from various backgrounds, but played a key role in the criminal group's breakthrough, ultimately helping them to secure slides of cocaine trade from wholesale supply to the streets of Europe and beyond. So we have identified in this report the key people behind their rise as follows. So we have the runners. Runners are criminal fleeing law enforcement in Europe who view and have viewed South America as a final getaway for their illicit activities. They have established themselves as an important brokers throughout the time, after working not only for one organization, but for multiple organizations, depending on who pays them more. Figures like, let's say, Albanian Dritan Recepi in Ecuador or Serbian Goran Nesic in Brazil are good examples of this category of runners that they have carved their way in South America, and they become also important contact point for organized crime groups of their region. Another important category, there are emissaries. Emissaries, in fact, are handpicked representatives of criminal groups who operate exclusively on the behalf of their organizations in South America. Their assignments are often temporary, with rotation in different countries of South America based on the needs of the criminal organization that they represent. While it's true that engaging in criminal activity typically doesn't require a CV, the important role of cocaine emissaries is an exception to this rule. On the graph on the left, you can also see what are some of the requirements to be a cocaine emissary for Western Balkan organized crime groups. Another very important category is also that of the businessman. So businessmen are individuals who own legitimate-looking business in South America, and they come from the Western Balkans. Often they engage in the import-export activities to conceal their illicit operations. They are typically well-established. They have then they have forged strong connections, not only within the criminal world, but also with the local business partners. Over time, they also have been integrated into high level of power, further solidifying their influence, and we are going to bring some examples later on. Next slide. The business model that Western Balkan OCGs used to entrench themselves in South America is considered key to their success. In their operations on this continent, they have shown their ability to adapt their structures and form strategic partnership. Western Balkan national criminal have forged relationships spanning a wide range of actors in South America, from small cocaine producers, let's say in Peru, local gangs in Ecuador, to major cartels in Colombia and Brazil. While organized crime groups in the Western Balkan region typically have a clear leadership structure, Balkan groups in South America tend to prefer a horizontal organizational model, allowing them for flexibility. Due to the transnational nature of the cocaine trafficking, these groups have become highly adaptable. Their operations in South America are often seen as joint venture or just projects, bringing together criminal organizations from different countries and ethnic backgrounds who are in the right place in the right time with necessary resources and skill to achieve their goals. They also have also managed in many cases to embed themselves in the local network by settling and investing in business with locals. These businesses disguise drug operations and launder the money. Additionally, they have created strong social bonds, such as marrying local and starting families in many of the countries where they operate. They have also adopted a cautious approach and avoid interaction and conflicts with rival foreign groups in South America, such as Mexican cartels, for example, mentioned by Felipe, that they are also quite active as a foreign actors in South America. The Balkan groups maintain a policy of non-engagement with representatives of the Mexican cartels. Furthermore, unlike Mexican groups, Western Balkan organized one, they do not seek territorial control in South America, which gives them an advantage in building relationships with local groups and operating without violence. And so this is a very important comparative advantage. It is very important to mention that the Western Balkan hostages in this continent exploit local vulnerabilities. In many cases, they force their way through corruption, bribing officials at all levels and even other professionals in the countries where they operate. The lack of infrastructure, such as scanners at ports and border monitoring, help facilitate their operations. In many cases, they use multiple identities and forged documents, making the work of the local law enforcement authorities in this continent much more difficult. We have, for example, cases of Zoran Jakšić from Group America that now it's in prison in Peru, that when was arrested, it was known that he had more than 40 different identities in order to evade justice, including false passports from the Balkan countries, but also South American countries as well. The success of their operations in South America is due also to the financial advantages that they bring. Local producers in Peru and Ecuador prefer working with Western Balkan traffickers because they consider them reliable and always paying quickly, mainly in cash, unlike, let's say, Mexican cartels or Colombian ones, who often pay with drugs or weapons. For example, Mexicans, they frequently take cocaine and they pay back with heroin, which has created big addiction issues in some countries like Ecuador. So very obviously they are not very keen to work with them. Rather, they would prefer the groups from the Balkans where they are going, in many cases, to take the money up front. Uh, Balkan criminals, according to the case studies that we have analyzed, often pay 50% of transportation cost upfront, and the rest once the cocaine reaches Europe. With transportation costs sometimes reaching $2,000 per kilogram, their emissaries in South America act as guarantors. Additionally, their status as a major wholesaler in Europe allow them to negotiate better deals, sometimes offering to handle retail distribution for South American groups like the Ecuadorian gangs in exchange for lower price and reduced fees. Next slide. Ecuador. So not without a reason, I have chosen Ecuador as a key illustration for the entrenchment of the Western Balkan criminals in South America. Because Ecuador is really a crucial hub for these groups. They are in this country, they are primarily settled in the port city of Guayaquil, that you can also see in the picture, and they live in the gated communities, guarded communities, and they travel around the city in armored car. And so they have a very high, they take a lot of precautions in order to operate. They throughout the time and throughout this 15-20 years, the criminals of this region they have been able to forge strong connections with local actors in this country. And Ecuador has a criminal scene that is largely dominated by fragmented local gangs with a violent reputation. Uh, the connection between Balkan criminals and the leaders of these gangs are very often forged in Ecuadorian prisons. Um, and so because of these connections, they have a very advantageous position in Ecuador, being able to procure cocaine from Colombia and Peru and use the many ports of Ecuador, in fact, in order to ship it in Europe and beyond. The bonds between Balkan criminals and the Ecuadorian gangs are so deep that, for example, Ecuadorian gangs leaders have even asked and they usually do, they ask their Balkan counterparts to be, let's say, godparents of their children. Investigations and court cases also reveal that the Balkan emissaries and businessmen often marry local women, further cementing their integration into the local society. Balkan groups in this country also have cultivated strong business and political ties. I'm going to bring here the example of a crime boss. His name is, he's Albanian, and his name is Dritan Gjika, who was operating as a businessman in Ecuador for a decade, using his companies to disguise drug trafficking. Giga led a criminal organization that, according to Europol, imported 4 tons of cocaine a month from Colombia to Ecuador before shipping it to Europe. At the time where the operation led by Europol took place, which was last year, he controlled 12 companies. Authorities seized properties worth 48 millions of euro. 36 millions of euros in assets were seized in Ecuador and 2 million others in Spain. But very interestingly, Jica drew attention due to his business ties with Danilo Carrera, the brother-in-law of former Ecuadorian President Guillermo Lasso, who has seen, and he was seen as very close in the Lasso inner circle by the opposition and media in Ecuador. So this is a concrete example, in fact, how far this criminal organization from the Balkans they have gone in their entrenchment in societies, political life, and high-level circles of the countries where they operate. Next slide. I'm going to speak shortly about the trafficking methods that they use, which in fact they are not very different from the traffic methods that other groups use in order to bring the cocaine from Latin America into Europe and beyond. So traffickers of the Western Balkans mainly use container ship to bring the drug in Europe. But increasingly, and depending on the route, they also use fishing boats, merchant vessels, sailing vessels, speedboats, and even there have been recorded attempts to use submarines and underwater drones, and this shows about the financial strength that they have. What we are seeing that I believe is important to share with you is the fact that we are seeing some shift in the way how they send the drug by maritime. So due to the fact that there is a heightened alert from European authorities regarding containerized good coming from some countries of Latin America, like Colombia or Ecuador, we are seeing the criminal groups using alternative departing points. Let's say they have started to use Dominican Republic or West Africa, so they can disguise the starting point of the containers that are infected with cocaine that enter in Europe. So these are some of the techniques that we are seeing right now. And I also want to announce that at the Global Initiative, we are currently working in a report that is mapping the presence and the operations of the Western Balkan criminal groups in West Africa, because that is considered also a very important route that they are using recently. Private planes are also very widely used. But what we see is the fact that these groups use mainly private planes rather than cargo ones, although there has also been recorded cases where they were using cargos and try to send drugs, let's say, directly from Brazil to Frankfurt airport in Germany. In case of the private planes, they are mainly used to transport drugs within one country to another in South America before shipping them to Europe. But we are also seeing the use of planes by them to move the drugs within other continents, such as Africa. Next slide. By forging strong ties and establishing a presence in South America, criminal groups from the Balkans have gained the capacity to procure large quantities of cocaine, very often with favorable price. This has made them increasingly eager to establish different routes, as I was mentioning, for the delivering of the drugs to Europe and beyond, including North America, Africa, Asia, and Australia. Asia and Australia, the later two, are particularly lucrative when it comes to cocaine trafficking. And what we are seeing right now is there are efforts of the Balkan groups to expand in these regions, and they are doing many efforts to do so. So as a result, we are seeing a more diverse cocaine trafficking route. So in addition to, let's say, the well-established route from Ecuador or Colombia, sometimes via Caribbean or West Africa to Europe, we are now seeing more shipments from these groups, let's say from Brazil, and as a pit stop or a hub point, we are seeing more and more South Africa or East Africa in the way so the loads of drugs can end up in Asia and Australia. So these are some of the new trends that we're seeing, and as I said, so they're now trying to expand in Asia and Australia, which is a market that it considered lucrative, and they want to be more present in there. Next slide. However, without any doubt, the presence of these groups in South America has not come without cost and losses. Alongside the arrest of emissaries and also and the seizure of the large quantity of cocaine, also thanks to decrypted communication apps like Sky and EncroChat, the expanding footprint of the Western Balkan OCGs in this continent is also marked by a trail of blood. According to Global Initiative analysis, at least 19 people linked to cocaine trafficking from the Western Balkans have been killed in South America since 2010. The majority of these killings have took place in Ecuador, and in fact, all the killings in Ecuador, they took place in the port city of Guayaquil. And some others, the second largest one was Colombia and Bolivia. And as I said, the trail of blood shows also where these groups are present the most. And as we mentioned, this is the city port of Guayaquil that we analyzed a little bit closer. 9 of the identified victims were Serbian citizens, and 6 other were Albanian citizens. The routine use of forged identities, including non-Western Balkan passports, suggests that maybe the number of those kills might be even higher, but it's very difficult to identify these people with forged passport, where they are from, and so on. So these are kind of like confirmed, but it might be many other cases that we don't know yet. Next slide. Dubai plays, and this is also an illustration that I have used, Dubai plays a crucial role, in fact, in the success of Western Balkan criminal groups in South America and beyond. And you are going to wonder why. In fact, let's take an example. In March 2023, the US Treasury sanctioned Edin Gacanik, the leader of the Tito Andino cartel, labeling him as one of the most wild, prophilic drug trafficker. Gacanin, that has been very much engaged in the global drug trafficking and also with very strong links in South America, has set up residence in United Arab Emirates, which is known for its difficulty in extraditing criminals. In November 22, Gacanin was arrested in the Europol coordinated operation Desert Light, targeting a super cartel that he was part of. This super cartel controlled a third of cocaine entering in Europe. However, although all of these kind of operations and designations again him, however, his extradition to the Netherlands failed, and Gacanin is still believed to be in UAE, despite also being convicted by a Dutch court on drug trafficking charges. But Gacanin, without any doubt, is not the only high-level criminal with South American links to find shelter in Dubai. The businessman that we talked about, Dritan Jica in Ecuador, who had high-level ties with officials in this country, is also in Ecuador. Eldi Dizdari, the leader of Compagnia Bello, considered one of the largest Albanian-speaking in cocaine trafficking, is also in Dubai, and the Italian authorities, they have failed also to extradite him from this country. So the UAE has long been a haven for top Balkan criminals, offering a safe environment for laundering criminal proceeds and evading justice. In there, they would buy real estate, set up companies, many times under their name, but also on other names, and fuel illicit money into legitimate financial channels. Most importantly, in fact, they are also able to coordinate their transnational cocaine operation from this place, while keeping their business running smoothly. Next slide. So the report has more, and I really encourage you to read. And now it's online. But I wanted to share some key recommendations that we have put together as a global initiative after studying and analyzing for more than 2 years the links of the Western Balkan OCGs in South America. So one of the key point, according to us, is the need to strengthen collaboration of the law enforcement agencies in the Western Balkans, South America, and the EU. This could include, for example, forming joint investigation teams and deploying Western Balkan investigators to South America to improve intelligence sharing, but also coordinations. South America, on the other hand, should focus on reducing cocaine production and intensifying efforts to tackle corruption that it has helped these groups progress and facilitate their operations. This should be supported by adopting advanced technology to detect more easily cocaine at the ports and the airports. Additionally, it's very important that the foreign aid also is being channeled in these directions, and the countries of South America are helped more in order to raise their capacity in detecting cocaine. Western Balkan countries also need to enhance their domestic law enforcement capabilities, especially when it comes to combating illicit financial flows. Because, of course, we are seeing these criminals from these countries operating in many geographies, but and laundering money, of course. They launder money in South America. They establish companies there and so on. They launder money in Dubai with companies and so sometimes in the Western European countries. But of course, they maintain a strong link with their home countries. And a part of the proceeds of crime that they generate are laundered in these countries in the region. And also the region itself it helps them to recruit foot soldiers, which are very important in this transnational operation. So for the Balkan countries also, it's very important to expand extradition agreements and improve legal collaboration with other countries in an effort to disrupt criminal networks. Last but not least, diplomatic pressure is always important. So, for example, the EU and its partners should increase diplomatic efforts, and to do this in a joint way, to press the UAE into facilitating extraditions, reducing the role as a safe haven for criminals, and encouraging a greater accountability in tackling organized crime. So this was my presentation, but I believe we're going to have time for Q&A after also my colleague will have their own presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fatjona. Indeed, a very, very interesting presentation, and a couple of things to bring back is key the way who Western Balkans group operate, these three different ways of working as brokers, as businessmen, but also as representative. But what I find most interesting of the report and of the presentation is the way how they have engaged in this very complex South American context, where there are other plethora of local criminal groups operating. And right there is where I want to pick up the presentation of my colleague, Renato. Renato, Balkans groups and Western Balkan groups has been present in Ecuador for a while. They have been doing business there, but apparently they also play a key role in the violence and the situation that leave Ecuador in the last couple of years. What's the perspective from the South American side, from Ecuador, of the role of these groups, and what is the perspective of those? The floor is yours, Renato.
Thank you very much. I'll share my presentation, so just give me one second. Okay. Thank you, Mary. Just to confirm, can you see the presentation? Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so to understand the logics between what I call it the Albanian effect, or the misname, the Albanian effect in Ecuador, or in general terms, the influence of Balkan criminal groups, I'll put emphasis on understanding why it has to do with the violence in Ecuador nowadays, and why it is so important to understand to what extent the Albanian groups work with the criminal organizations in Ecuador. Specifically, I will explore why these groups chose Ecuador as the preferential hub for cocaine trafficking. Fatjona was explaining that Ecuador has been key to Balkan groups in Ecuador, but I will explore why this is relevant and why this is interconnected with the Colombian cocaine production and the European consumption of cocaine. So to understand the evolution of these groups in Ecuador, I will outline two key interrelated factors that have driven this phenomenon. Specifically, I will say the implementation of the multi-part trade agreement, in general terms, the free trade agreement between the European Union and Ecuador, facilitated the contamination of cocaine in banana containers. Criminal groups planned their operations. They see what is happening in international commerce, and they understand that this is an opportunity to engage in new businesses related specifically in cocaine production. And two, the financial influence of Balkan groups in Ecuador's criminal fragmentation. Ecuador is the most violent country in Latin America. So there's a relationship why this is happening in the country. So some initial considerations. First, the insertion of foreign criminal groups has led to a specialization in drug trafficking chain, generating fierce competition among local criminal organizations. This has resulted in an aggressive reduction in logistical cost and increased outsourcing of services in the context of criminal fragmentation in Ecuador. Two, currently drug trafficking logistics in Ecuador follow an oligopolistic model. let's say, in other words, a few criminal groups control transportation costs and dominate international drug trafficking. Their operations depend on the connection between transnational networks and consumer markets, the Balkan groups. In Ecuador's case, Balkan groups are the only ones capable of coordinating cocaine shipments from Ecuadorian ports to Europe, using methods that Fadjona was explaining that combine white-collar crime group activities, with opportunities derived from the trade agreement with the European Union. So the free trade agreement between Europe and Ecuador, and this is key in my research. I am explaining why free trade agreements are an opportunity for criminal organizations in a globalized world. So what happened in Ecuador? Since 2017, Ecuador has enforced a multi-part trade agreement with the European Union, promoting openness, market openness, and increased investments. As a result, non-oil exports, banana, represent 29% of the total exportations to Europe. 1 out of 3 bananas consumed in Europe are from Ecuador, so Ecuador is a key market. The bananas, from Ecuador are a key market to Europe. This commercial expansion provided an ideal platform from Balkan groups, facilitating the shipment of cocaine hidden in banana containers. This is very important to understand why this is relevant. For example, if you see this graph, by 2022, 5 out of every 10 cocaine seizures in Ecuadorian ports were destined for Europe. So if you see a relation between banana containers and cocaine seizures, there's a relation between both. If you have more commerce of banana to Europe, you also have more seizures of cocaine in the ports. Bananas have become the transnational currency for Balkan criminal networks to move large shipments of cocaine to the old continent. If you see, for example, the example that Fadjona was explaining with Dritan Jika and Dritan Rexepi, also two criminal key actors in Ecuador, both of them made investments in the banana agriculture sector, and it has to do also with the corruption link with Danilo Carrera and Robert Cherres that were close to the former president Guillermo Lasso. In general terms, what did the Balkans prefer, or what they did different in Ecuador? First, they use banana companies for cocaine storage. They corrupt businessmen and officials linked to the export system. And they facilitate also the financing of groups responsible for drug security and transportation from the Colombia-Ecuador border. I will explain it in the next 5 minutes. So what happened with Dritan Jika and Danilo Carrera and Guillermo Lasso? In 2022, Dritan Jika established several companies in partnership with Ruben Cherres, a close associate of the brother-in-law former President Guillermo Lasso. Jika created shell companies to acquire export quotas and cover up cocaine trafficking in Ecuador. This is key to understand, for example, the corruption between the Ministry of Agriculture, the links with Danilo Carrera, and this triangulation, I would say, with the Albanians or Balkan groups in Ecuador. They don't do business directly with criminal organizations in Ecuador. They are white-collar criminals in Ecuador, so the relation is quite different. As a result, the success of Balkan groups in Ecuador depends, I will say, on the ability to establish ties with high-level businessmen and politicians in the country's main exports, specifically in Guayaquil. So what's the link with local criminal groups, the Balkan criminal groups, with the Ecuadorian criminal groups? And there's 3 key factors that I will say are key to understand this relationship. One, the COVID pandemic accelerated the fragmentation of the Ecuadorian criminal groups, specifically Los Choneros. At the same time, Balkan groups needing to ensure cocaine transportation to Europe promoted a financing system for local gangs to guarantee drug storage and transport. This is in 2020. Due to the reduced ability of boats or shipments during the pandemic, Albanians were forced to increase payment per kilo of cocaine from the Colombian border to Ecuadorian ports, reaching up to 50% of the cargo's value. This is a research made actually with GI-TOC and Inside Crime. I think in 2022 they did this research. This financing increased competition among the Ecuadorian criminal groups, exacerbating violence in the country. Simultaneously, the incursion of Mexican cartels, such as the Jalisco Nueva Generación, intensified disputes over control of the cocaine market in key areas such as the Colombia-Ecuador border and the ports of Guayaquil in Machala. That's why you see an increased violence in these three key areas. These events make Balkan groups one of the most legitimate criminal actors in the purchase of cocaine in Ecuador. So if you see what is different between let's say the Albanians in Ecuador, but the Balkan groups in Ecuador, are that they don't do business with a specific organization. They don't do strategic alliances with anyone. What they do is that they pay for the ones that are the organizations that are quicker to move cocaine from Colombia to Ecuador. That made not only it has to do with the fragmentation of criminal organizations in Ecuador, but also make this fierce competition among the criminal organizations in Ecuador to move the Balkan cocaine purchases that they make specifically in Colombia. Some conclusions, just to be very, very brief. One, the profitability of the drug trafficking logistic chains in Ecuador has generated a cycle of violence in which local groups seek legitimacy through alliances with transnational organizations, specifically the Balkan groups. And two, despite the Ecuadorian state efforts to reduce criminal violence has started since 2020, the judicial system response has shown little interest in investigating the financial networks behind cocaine trafficking in Ecuador. Behind this business, the true key players are the Balkan emissaries and corrupt politicians who ensure the market's continuity regardless of changes in local criminal structures. I think we have some time for questions and answers, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Renato. And I believe this complements a lot the history and the report that was presented by Fatjona, because then we try to see this as a very operational situation where Western Balkans criminal groups are literally participating in the logistics of the cocaine supply chain. But here, what I find very relevant is that they have been also very efficient in get to a state structure, to justice system structure, and to co-opt the state, just to make this operate. And this also relates to what Fatjona was saying in the way how Western Balkan groups operate. But then these mechanisms of operation also needs tools and also needs a specific means of communication. And this is what I want to introduce my colleague Sasha, who is gonna explain a little bit more how these more complex ways of communication and interactions between Western Balkan groups actually facilitates or enables what we have seen in the previous presentation. Sasha, it's a pleasure, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Felipe, for the kind introduction. So, Claudio, can you open the presentation? Yes. So, yeah, so in this presentation, I will walk you through the key role, as Felipe explained, that communication platforms play in organized crime with a particular focus on the Western Balkans. And as Fatjona, Felipe, and Renato already highlighted earlier, criminal groups from the Western Balkans have become key players in the global cocaine trade. But to reach that level, they relied a lot heavily on secure and creative ways to communicate. And I remember one of the cases, like it was in 2009, So their methods were quite and relatively simple. For example, criminals from the region, and Fatjona mentioned the Sharij group, they use basically shared Gmail accounts where they type draft messages without ever hitting send. And basically that was the trick to leaving the trace, because they all have the password. And very interesting, the account name, when translated to English, simply meant friends or the drugari in Serbia. But that was in 2009, and right now, fast forward to the day, the picture is far more complex. With the rise of encrypted messaging platforms like SkyCC, like EncroChat, and rapid tech development, criminals now use a range of sophisticated platforms to stay under the radar of law enforcement, and actually also to coordinate across borders. Next slide. So during this presentation, I basically want to provide to answer to 4 main questions, as you can see on the slide. So basically, which encrypted communication platforms were commonly used, not only by the Western Balkans groups, but also like more broadly. So what was the role of this platform in criminal operations, and also what was the impact, especially on the law enforcement? And finally, how do Balkan criminal networks communicate today, which is also very important. So next slide. So encrypted. So before you already see the list of all encrypted tools that actually we identify in the research. But encrypted communication platform was basically very crucial for Balkan criminal networks, not only for cocaine procurement in Latin America, but even more, I think, for transportation to Europe, Australia, and even Asia. And there are 5 key things to know about encrypted communication. So first one is like secrecy and security. So it usually happens over like encrypted platform, like you can see on SkyCC or EncroChat, to avoid law enforcement. But ultimately, law enforcement break these apps. Like with development of mobile technology, so more and more like these were like digital tools, and criminals rely on security application like burner phones, but also satellite phones, which is completely on research area, and even private servers. Operation coordination, like this message are used to manage logistics, smuggling route, payments, and also money laundering schemes. Communication often span across countries, regions, and even continents, explaining that what we actually heard, like this transnational and multinational structure of different organized crime groups. And in the end, ultimately, this was like the target of the law enforcement, like these communication apps, like intercepting these messages gives law enforcement authority like critical insight into how these criminal networks operate, including Balkan criminal networks. So over the last 20 years, so criminals have used more than 10 different encrypted communication platforms. So on these slides, you can see the identified platforms so far, along with their names, the year they were launched or discovered by law enforcement or media, and the year they were disrupted. So basically, it all began around 2006 with the use of modified BlackBerry devices and the development of the early secure messaging app known as B-Stealth. And since then, new platforms have continued to emerge. Some of the more recent ones identified by law enforcement called Matrix and also Cipher. And basically, out of this 13 encrypted messages platforms identified so far, at least 3 have been actively used by members of Balkan criminal networks. And you can see in this purple circle, and these are SkyCC, EncroChat, and ANO. Among them, most of you already heard about SkyCC, and it stands out as the most widely used by Balkan criminal network. with the highest number of users, and usually officials from the EU member states actually said that English, Albanian, and Serbo-Croatian were the languages that were mostly used on SkyECC. And over time, until disruption of SkyECC, it became the tool for secure coordination within, but also between criminal groups in the region, including with cocaine producers and sources in Latin America. Next slide. So basically, what was the role of encrypted communication? And these platforms were primarily used, as you can see on the slide, primarily to organize drug trafficking and money laundering operation. And basically, when you read the communication SkyECC, particularly communication available in different indictments in Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, and Croatia. So basically, all this communication reflected the different roles within criminal organizations that actually members of Balkan criminal networks have. So basically, it's like a pyramid. So each of the groups, so there are leaders, and basically they negotiated directly with cocaine suppliers, gave orders, and managed finances. And for example, like in the intercepted SkyECC messages, so a high-ranking member of a Serbian organized crime group communicated with supplier named Perola in Brazil. From Brazil, and it's very interesting case because the messages showed that Perola was a woman known for her firmness and unwillingness to negotiate, challenging the idea that only men hold top roles in the cocaine trade. And I'm basically paraphrasing, but it was like Perola, it was very tough in negotiation, but the members of the Serbian group were very grateful. So this is like that actually SkyECC was used basically to procure for transportation of cocaine from, in this case, from Brazil. The second that Fatjona already mentioned, like brokers or emissaries. So these individuals were crucial to daily operations. So they manage logistics, and they use like a platform like SkyECC, including like opening and closing different companies. To mask shipments, as Renato explained, to different banana companies or different products in agriculture, but also like they use SkyECC and other applications for smuggling routes, for pickup points, for coordination, but also with trusted contacts. And basically, criminal organization couldn't function without these people, brokers that are on the middle range, and they typically reported to leaders of the group, just basically like in a regular workplace, updating on completed tasks, reporting issues, or asking like for new timelines or deadlines even. So basically, and there is also one example from SkyECC, is one of the messages. A broker reports picking up tons of cocaine, and he used SkyECC to share a photo of the stash of cocaine in a safe house and send a thumbs up like emoji saying everything is okay, now it's ready. And the final level of basically what we can see also from analyzing different messages of SkyECC is basically enforcers. So they carry out ground level tasks like collecting and delivering drugs, managing storage, and securing safe houses. And usually they report to the brokers, brokers report to the leaders. And it's also very interesting that encrypted platform like SkyECC and EncroChat were also used for private communication of members of Balkan criminals network with family members, showing how this tool became regular stuff in their everyday lives. And actually, it demonstrates their trust in this application, at least until disruption, which sometimes actually exceed even our expectation. And recently, I talked with a colleague about like Swedish Serbian criminal who trusted Anom, which is also one of the applications, so much even to the police, despite the fact the police actually pick up and seize his drugs so many times. But this case, it was incredible. He always trusted Anom so much. It was like his baby, basically. And by the way, just to add, in the Western Balkans, because mostly in the Western Balkans we discuss about SkyCC, but actually last week the higher court in Podgorica in Montenegro confirmed the first indictment based on Anom communication, and basically this is the first case in the Western Balkans based on Anom. So, and next slide, and we are going up to the impact of law enforcement of SkyCC on the law enforcement. So basically, this is like enormous intelligence information, not only important for law enforcement, but also like the researchers like we are. So the intelligence gathered from decrypted SkyCC messages intercepted led to a wave of police operations and indictments across the Western Balkans, but not only in the region, also in Europe, especially in the Netherlands and Belgium. And basically this crackdown has very serious blow to the Balkan criminal networks. But again, because these networks are highly decentralized, flexible, and as Fatjona already explained, they can easily recruit new members. These networks are still active and continue to operate today. And basically, let's look at this. At some of the main results and developments following the SkyCC takedowns. So first one is the establishment of the operational task force called the Balkan Cartel. So basically, SkyCC had a strong impact on international police cooperation. So basically, law enforcement had to also mirror like the structure of organized crime groups and like in this case the structure of researchers. So basically there is a mix of law enforcement cooperation between Latin America, Western Balkans, and Europe to have like to actually check and cross all the data received through communication. But even before its official takedown of SkyCC, law enforcement agency across Europe had started working more closely together, especially targeting like Balkan criminal networks. And one of the first major operation was Operation Familia, concluded in 2019, which led to the seizure of 2 million euros in cash and over a ton of cocaine. And actually, when I mentioned just the countries, so it included both EU and not EU countries, including, for example, Australia, Belgium, Costa Rica, Paraguay, Croatia, France, Serbia, Slovenia, even Malaysia. So basically, you can imagine how much effort is needed basically to check all the messages and to find out who is behind SkyCC message. And in July, so basically at the same time when where everything was so hot about SkyCC, Europe officially set up the operational task force Balkan Cartel, and since then, so since 2020 until now, we have like many of the major results in fighting organized crime that have links with the region have been linked to intelligence from the SkyCC. So basically, we have a multiply cocaine seizures across multiple continents. So it's not only the Balkans, but it's also mostly Europe, but also in Latin America, also in some point also in West Africa or close to West Africa. And I will just mention like two seizures from 2024. So in November 2024, there was like a joint actions between law enforcement in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croatia, and Serbia, together with EU law enforcement agency, and they actually discover a network that use usual stuff like corruption, bribery, corrupt custom officials, and basically to conceal shipping containers. And basically this case was, they also seized like 1 million euros in cash, but also some luxury goods, firearms, which are very important for the Balkan criminal networks activities. And this is one of the action. And before that, there was like one big action that follow up on the what Fatjona mentioned early about like spreading links with Australia. So there was like one big operation where Montenegrin authorities arrested basically 9 high-valued targets, and they were part of the broader networks of more than 20 members. And again, there was like seizures of cocaine and also cash. So based on these seizures, so usually there are plenty of arrests, and I just mentioned some of the countries only. For example, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, like police services in Bosnia and Herzegovina based on SkySCC arrested like 170 people between 2021 and 2024, and basically this trend is mirrored in other countries across the Western Balkans. After arrest, usually there is also like indictments, and prosecutors basically have filed indictments in Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, Croatia, and Serbia, targeting both crime figures, so members of Balkan criminal networks, but also like corrupt official. But what's the problem is that we have very few final verdicts have been issued so far, and most cases are still in the progress, which also link with this issue of legality of SkySCC communication. And I have like verdicts, a few examples. For example, in Serbia, a police inspector who sold information to a criminal group was sentenced to 1.2 years of prison and banned to work from police work for 5 years. So this verdict is based on SkySCC communication. And another case in Montenegro, the former president of Supreme Court was sentenced 6 months in prison for abuse of office. And this is one of 3 cases in which she was involved, but actually we also expecting that there will be some complaints and the judiciary proceeding will continue. So this is like a very huge impact, especially in the law enforcement operation on the work and performance of police, prosecution, and judiciary. But this is like the ongoing, and we actually expect much more, especially considering that recent discovery of ANOM application. So next slide. So basically from a previous slide, you can already understand who was involved in using SkySCC and but basically what is important, the structure varies from country to country. In some places, in some country, law enforcement and judiciary are main targets, like in Montenegro, because in Montenegro we have like plenty of cases like where even the chief prosecutor for organized crime was arrested because of Skies and because allegedly linked to organized crime, while in others the focus is more on organized crime members, and this is like the case in Serbia and Croatia. But overall, so the structure across the region is like this. So we have like organized crime group members. For example, in Albania, SPAC, which is like specialized prosecution dealing with organized crime and corruption case, they targeted so far like 9 organized crime criminal groups based on SkySCC intelligence. In Montenegro, there are 6 major cases, mainly organized crime links led back to the Kavach clan, and Tatjana mentioned in her presentation before that this is the one of the strongest organization in the region. In Montenegro, in Croatia, we have like 4 important indictments, including the Petra group, which operated between South America and Western Europe, delivering cocaine to Western Europe. And we already mentioned Frankfurt, and usually by car, like transportation distribution in Western Europe in a car, and they actually gather like between 1 and 20 kilograms. The Frankfurt was the hotspot. In Serbia, we have at least 7 major cases, and most of them are connected also with Montenegro-based Kavach clan. But it's not only for drug trafficking, it's also for murders and money laundering. The second category is politicians. We also have like politicians in Albania. The mayor of Tirana is under investigation, and one member of the parliament has been arrested. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, advisor to the Ministry of Security is implicated. So this is like then we have a lot of police officers, and Montenegro basically, and prosecutors. Montenegro stands out. So high-ranking prosecutors, including those handling organized crime cases, have been arrested or placed in custody. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, 28 police officers are under investigation and 5 have already been indicted. There are also like some judges. Investigation touches like members of the judiciary too. It's like in only few cases, and also like members of national security, like agents and officials. That's also case in Montenegro. So basically, this is the structure, and it actually prove that organized crime once again proved that organized crime cannot actually exist and live without support from individuals that actually works for public sector. Next slide. So I'm almost to the end. So what's going on right now? So let's look at this slide, how criminal groups are adapting their communication methods in response to law enforcement pressure. So after the takedowns of platforms like SkyCC and EncroChat, criminal groups are not going back to basic phones or open channels, as obvious, but instead they're getting more creative and more sophisticated. And actually some groups are now building their own encrypted communication tools designed for example, for one specific operation or only for trusted members. And these apps are not available to the public, making them harder for law enforcement to detect or infiltrate. So they also like recruit IT experts. So basically hiring professional IT and software developers, including some with experience in cybersecurity. And basically their job is to build, maintain, and secure group-specific communication systems. So only for example, for one operation or only for one group. New method is basically simultaneous use of multiple apps. So basically group no longer rely on a single platform. They use several encrypted apps, including like open and closed, switching between them to reduce the risk exposure. So for example, they can text, so the broker can text in one app what is the, I don't know, pickup point, what is the street or warehouse. So in the second, they will use another, and they use also usually like different language, basically not to be detected by law enforcement. And this tactic also makes it more difficult for law enforcement, but also make complicate like communication between groups. Use of satellite phones, we use, this is particularly used on the sea, on the open sea, when they actually transfer from one yacht to another yacht. And this is like from the research perspective, it's very unresearched area. And in the end, we have like use of some lesser known or niche applications, like small scale, like some obscure application for their communication. So basically, they have a basic encryption, but they are used strategically to avoid attention. And basically, these are like some ongoing trends, how organized crime is basically adapting quickly in the digital space. And actually, it's also proved why law enforcement must also keep evolving to match these tactics. So if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sasha. So we have a couple of minutes left in our time, and we have plenty of questions in the Q&A. So I would like, Fatjona, if you want to start picking up some of the questions, as we have discussed, some of them are similar, and just provide some general insights, and then we allow some time to Sasha to go on very specific questions that are also asking in the encrypted communication methods. Go ahead, Fatjona.
It's a difficult task, Felipe, because there are so many questions, and the topic is quite it's quite large, without any doubt. Let's take some questions. So I also try to reply the question on confiscation. So somebody asked about the confiscation. I was not very clear. The confiscation of assets created by criminal proceeds. Confiscation in general is low, and it's not only low in Ecuador or in some other countries, but it's also low in the EU countries. So I was reading the SOCTA report of Europol, and there it was clearly said that despite substantial investments in resources and legislative frameworks, the confiscation of criminal proceeds has stagnated at around an estimated 2% of illicit proceeds. So when this is the case in some EU countries, imagine how it is for other countries. Ecuador has a bad record in terms of confiscation of assets. And so these things needs to change, and of course, without any doubt, more effort should be put into the confiscation. But there are also some good examples from example, Albania. It's a good example because of a special prosecution and court built on the fight against organized crime and high-level corruption. We're seeing more and more not only seizures of criminal assets, but also confiscation. So it's ongoing work and challenge for many countries. Another question that comes from Albania is, how strong do you think that the connection is between the expansion of alien trafficking towards in the Western Balkan and Albania on the other hand, and the sophistication of corruption? So one of the major challenges, so thank you, Zef, for your question. One of the main challenges that Western Balkan countries have is the fact that those are small countries. Those are small countries that they have large criminal organizations operating abroad. And so they need a lot of efforts in order to tackle them. And especially in the past, in countries like Albania, organized crime groups, they have been able to also penetrate high level of politics, business, and so on. And of course, this takes a big toll on the society. However, as I said, what we are seeing right now in Albania is this special prosecution that is helping a lot in this direction. And there are very interesting cases. So, for example, not long ago in Albania, the SPAC was this special prosecutor was investigated an MP from the ruling party, in fact, that he was providing support and facilitation for criminal gangs in the country. So this is very severe case in line with other ones that Sasha mentioned. And of course, this is due to decryption of these communication apps, which in fact they have been proven very efficient, and they have helped a lot law enforcement agencies in Europe, in Balkans, in South America, but also us as a researcher to better understand where the challenges lie. So many questions. It's very difficult to pick. Okay, so we have 3 questions here on records of the Western Balkan crime group trafficking in West Africa. So as I mentioned, so we are currently, together with Sasha and our colleagues in West Africa, we're currently working in this direction. So we're trying to map out the modus operandi of these groups in this continent. And I can share something, although a full report is going to follow. What we are seeing is departure from the shores of Brazil or Suriname or Venezuela with mainly fishing boats, and then on the high sea, they are using speedboats that they will take the drugs in the shore of West Africa, and there the drug is going to be put in containers, depart from some of the ports, and later on carry on the journey into the Europe. And this was also the technique that I mentioned, the fact that they are trying to find some geographies that they are not very suspicious for law enforcement when containers enter in their country. UAE is always, as I said, it's not only a country where criminals that launder their proceeds of crimes and they reside and there they invade the justice. On the other hand, they also forge relationships there. So some of the most alliances that criminal groups have, besides the prisons, are also forged in United Arab Emirates. And so this is a very good opportunity. So, for example, we have information that Gachanin group and Gachanin and his key members that they reside in Dubai. They have formed this cartel, and they are working closely with Kinahan, Irish groups. They're working with Camorra, the Moroccan mafia, Dutch Moroccan mafia, and creating this kind of like syndicates from the United Arab Emirates and being able to help each other in operation across the world. Apart Ecuador. So Ecuador, it was taken as an example. But of course, for example, what we are seeing, there are other countries where they have, like, I mean, a very deep entrenchment. So one country that we are seeing, for example, is Brazil. Also, Brazil has been its home for many skilled Western Balkan brokers. And it's a country for many opportunities for them. And Brazil turns out to be very interesting also because of the fact that I also mentioned it serves as a start point for cocaine that transits in Africa and later on to these lucrative markets of Asia and Australia. So this is also, and we are seeing more and more presence of these groups in Brazil and trying to build structures and business structures as they have done in Ecuador, and also forge closer relationships. So yeah, some of the question, maybe Sasha, I want to take some more.
Yeah, I will try. So to answer to a couple of questions. So basically I have like this question, like SkyCC was collected as evidence of several arrests and judicial intervention. So basically, yes, as I said, right now we have like plenty of indictments against different structure of people that were like members or close associate to organized crime groups from the Western Balkans. But actually what the problems, and this is one of the gaps of the Western Balkans judiciary system, that actually trials against those people are very long, meaning like in time, and that's why we only have like a few verdicts so far. But actually, yes, there was like in the beginning some challenges about like explaining why is like SkyCC communication like validate evidence to be used or in the trial or not. Even right now we have like this debate, but in most of the cases, like actually judges approve SkyCC if is get through international legal assistance as valid evidence during the trial, but actually they also ask for more and more evidence, and I believe this will be the case in the future. So about like this second question about using new crypto phones like Solana Seeker. So basically what I know so far that Balkan criminals vector, there are no evidence or indications that for example, Solana Seeker is used, but as far as I know that the first shipment of Solana will be in mid 2025, and it looks like this is like a legit company and everything. So let's see if they want to use like crypto funds, because in other research you can also see on our webpage, we also explain how Balkan criminal networks are engaging in crypto frauds and crypto like money laundering through crypto. So about like this question about extraction labs in Europe will increase or reduce. So basically, I will guide you to check the also publication that we have on the website. It's called European Drug Trends Monitor, and actually we try to be very up to date what's going on in Europe with this drop and seizures, and using like smaller ports, not like this new like the big ports in Europe actually to traffic cocaine. So basically, you can find out answers there, because most of us are focusing on the Western Balkans. And let me see, is there any other? Yeah, so this is question from Daryl about do they use coding in communication? Actually, what we see from different communication, especially from SkyCC, that there is no coding. So maybe right now the situation is different, but actually they use in communication like everyday life communication. So it's nothing special. There are a lot of jargons and like abbreviation for something, and actually how they call I don't know, cocaine from Colombia, it's cola or something. So basically, yes, they have like slangs, but it's not like it's not coding.
Sasha, can I just jump? There are so many questions, so please feel free to follow up with the questions that we have also in our emails. And maybe Felipe, you can share my email and Sasha emails on the chat, so we can take all the questions, and then we can reply, because the time also is running out. But also, it's one question about how the cocaine from these groups comes from Latin America. It comes in the paste form. It comes in the powder form, and so on, all the forms, without in that. So there have been different kind of like cases. There have also been different cases that they have been put the cocaine in fertilizers, in coal, in construction materials, and then they have established in the Western Balkans or in some countries in Europe, like in the Netherlands, for example, labs. And they take Mexicans or Colombian cooks and their and others, in order to recuperate the drugs that it's in these materials. Liquid drug in asparagus cans, liquefy cocaine, we also have seen. So all sorts of ways how to send the cocaine, and they are constantly trying and trying to be innovative. So it's not only one way. I see that we have questions about Bulgaria and Greece. Of course, the Bulgarian criminal groups, they are also quite present in Latin America and in the Balkans. Criminal groups from the region, they have good collaboration with them. But the focus of our work has been mainly on the six Western Balkan countries that we mentioned, and it has been less on Bulgaria, which also it's very interesting country to analyze in this direction. And we know that Western Balkan groups collaborate quite often with them in different kind of like segment. As I said also in the presentation, so they come together as a joint venture. So if they see an opportunity, they gather and they exploit that opportunity. The relationship with Ndrangheta is very good. Of these groups, they don't have clashes. They don't have clashes. It's mainly collaboration whenever they could help each other. And also, as we said, the situation right now in South America is fragmented. It has space for everyone. Each of these groups can have their own brokers. They can have their sources. They have their own routes how to take the cocaine. So there's no need for clashes and conflict. Clashes and conflicts are only going to bring attentions from law enforcement, and they know this. So they don't clash, and they collaborate whenever that is good for both parties.
Thank you, Fatjona. I think we are out of time now, but yeah, I believe that the amount of questions is also representation of how interesting is the topic. Sorry, I couldn't make it to share the emails, but I don't know if Claudio can give me a hand. Then, if someone felt that their question was not addressed, feel free to reach the authors, both Fatjona and Sasha. I'm sure they will be happy to react. Once again, I just want to say thank you to all of you to participate today in the launch. You can download for free the report at the GI-TOC webpage. And yeah, thank you very much. And let's keep in touch for future developments on these topics and other interesting topics around organized crime. Thank you very much. Congratulations to John and Sasha.
Thank you, Felipe. Thank you, everyone.